Must see, Trump's quiet act that brought an empire to its knees. Let me start with a moment so brimming with tension and disbelief that even seasoned onlookers couldn't resist gaping in awe. High above the bustling lights of a global finance capital, at the peak of a gleaming skyscraper, something happened that would send shockwaves through corridors of power worldwide. And it started not with a fanfare or a rousing speech, but with a single, subtle move by Trump, so subtle, in fact, that hardly anyone noticed it at first. Stay with me through the twists and turns of this journey, because in the final stretch of this story, you'll learn exactly what that quiet act was, and how it dismantled an empire that once seemed unbreakable. This is not a tale of physical might or dramatic confrontation. Instead, it's a testament to how a seemingly small gesture can spark an unstoppable chain reaction, proving that sometimes the greatest upheavals are born from whispered strategies, not blaring trumpets. At the center of this labyrinthine drama stood a colossus of commerce, the Helix conglomerate, also known simply as the Helix. It was a sprawling entity of epic scale, with tentacles in industries spanning from electronics and biotech to shipping lanes and rare mineral extraction. Quietly over the decades, the Helix had outmaneuvered competitors, absorbing or bankrupting them through cunning deals. Beyond corporate influence, its holdings included media outlets, specialized technology patents, and hush-hush ties to certain political figures. Publicly, they claimed to champion progress and innovation, bragging about philanthropic efforts. Privately, though, rumor painted a darker portrait: environmental damage in remote lands, shady labor practices, and a labyrinth of shell companies hiding questionable flows of funds. And that's exactly why people were stunned when word leaked that Trump intended to meet with the Helix's reclusive chairman, Benedict K. Fallbridge. Everyone assumed it would be just another high-profile negotiation, maybe a joint venture or some strategic alliance. But as details trickled out, hints that Trump was heading into their fortress-like headquarters without a full legal squad or any elaborate fanfare, commentators began speculating. Why so secretive? Could he be searching for a piece of the massive Helix empire? Or was he naive enough to think he could outwit Fallbridge, whose cunning was legendary? News watchers dissected every clue. Over a month, paparazzi stationed themselves outside Helix's glass tower, perched in the city's financial district. They caught fleeting glimpses of a black sedan gliding in and out, believed to be carrying Trump. He never addressed the press, never shared a single line about how the talks were going. Insiders whispered that his approach confounded even his inner circle. Typically, he was known for public negotiations, strong-arm tactics, or flamboyant presentations. This time? Silence. Meanwhile, Helix employees walked around with uneasy expressions, as if they sensed an invisible tremor approaching. Fallbridge, the Helix chairman, was a man of storied legend, brilliant, manipulative, rumored to keep personal dossiers on everyone who mattered. He navigated the world's power structures with an almost supernatural flair for intimidation and strategic blackmail. If you threatened the Helix, you often found a sudden swarm of regulatory nightmares or leaked personal scandals. People with sense steered clear of crossing him. That's why the notion that Trump would calmly walk into Fallbridge's domain, apparently unafraid, left many observers expecting a fiery confrontation or a humiliating defeat. Yet day after day, any watchers posted outside the tower saw the same pattern: Trump's quiet arrivals, his quiet departures, and no sign of meltdown or triumphant press conference. A sense of anticlimax set in. Maybe there was no big drama, maybe it was all routine. The rumor mill churned: he must be negotiating a partnership. Possibly a minor stake in Helix. Another rumor posited that Fallbridge and Trump had discovered a shared philanthropic angle. But those who truly knew Helix's cutthroat style doubted philanthropic synergy. They predicted Trump would come out battered or forced into a subservient deal, if he came out at all. Then, one night, everything changed. Lights inside Helix's top-floor penthouse offices blazed far past midnight. Security was on edge, special vehicles arrived bearing unknown individuals. Over the next day, staffers emerged looking shaken, occasionally confiding to friends that something big had transpired behind closed doors. The media seized on these hints, though not even the best-connected journalists had direct evidence of what happened. Tension soared. That tension reached its peak when Helix's official social media channels went abruptly dark for hours, then reappeared with a bland, cryptic message about organizational restructuring. No further explanation. Speculation erupted, organizational restructuring? For one of the largest conglomerates on Earth? Yet Fallbridge had always insisted Helix was unstoppable. Meanwhile, an improbable rumor started swirling that Trump had orchestrated the entire meltdown, some cunning move that forced Helix to re-evaluate every single asset. But how? We now rewind to accounts from certain Helix insiders, those who, spooked by the events, eventually shared cryptic testimonies. They painted a picture reminiscent of a chess match. On a crucial evening, Fallbridge had summoned top Helix execs and attorneys to finalize a massive expansion plan. From what insiders gleaned, Trump had turned up unexpectedly. Fallbridge, apparently amused, welcomed him, thinking he would see the final pivot of negotiations. Yet as the hours ticked by, the atmosphere changed from Fallbridge's trademark smugness to something uneasy. It was rumored that Trump had brought with him documents meticulously highlighting Helix's darkest secrets, not just typical corporate skeletons, but evidence Fallbridge never dreamed someone outside his innermost circle could possess: secret bribes, exploitative labor contracts in hidden factories, entire shipping routes dedicated to circumvent environmental regulations. One staffer confided to a friend, it was as if he read Fallbridge's mind. Everything Fallbridge tried to spin, Trump calmly slid forward a new piece of evidence, cornering him. This staffer described Fallbridge's face as gradually draining of color. The meeting wore on into the late night, no food breaks, no phone calls, just tense confrontation. By morning, Fallbridge supposedly realized he held no winning card. The Helix empire might face catastrophic legal, financial, and reputational ruin if the documents surfaced. The staffer concluded, "I've never seen Fallbridge crumble like that. It was all quiet, no shouting, no theatrics, just unstoppable facts." That's how Trump did it. But that begs the question, how did Trump acquire such information? And why choose not to publicly expose Helix but instead handle it behind closed doors? We'll get to that in a moment. Let's just say that by the time the meeting ended, Fallbridge and his top execs were signing a reorganization blueprint that drastically changed Helix's structure. Entire divisions would be dismantled, unscrupulous operations ended, and certain exploited communities worldwide would see restitution. Fallbridge had to step down from certain controlling roles, ceding real power to new boards or local oversight committees. The staffer described it as he forced Helix to rewrite its moral code or face total collapse. The staffer then added a chilling line, he never raised his voice once. That was the scariest part. Do you think quiet persuasion, especially when backed by carefully curated facts, is more powerful than loud confrontation, or do you believe a public takedown is necessary for real justice? Let me know in the comments, because the debate on whether transparency or private negotiation yields better results is an age-old conflict. Now, what about that empire seemingly brought to its knees? Some might say that dismantling a few exploitative divisions, imposing new oversight, and toppling Fallbridge from absolute control isn't the same as destroying Helix. True, Helix remained a major corporate force afterward. But the fundamental shift in leadership and operational ethos was so sweeping that it felt like the end of an era. The empire Fallbridge had built, his personal fiefdom, essentially fell. Over the next days, memos from Helix's press office admitted to major reforms, promising more ethical sourcing and cooperative ventures with local communities. They claimed it was a natural evolution, not forced. But insiders rolled their eyes. They knew someone had forced it from the inside, thanks to the bombshell evidence. And all signs pointed to Trump, who apparently didn't gloat or demand public credit. He simply concluded the meeting and departed the next morning. A wave of confusion rolled through the city's influential circles. Where was the typical flamboyant victory lap? Where were the triumphant statements or press conferences brandishing Helix's downfall as a personal success? None came. Instead, Trump made a quiet exit from the city. People scrambled to interpret his motives. Some rumored that he struck a secret arrangement, possibly extracting large sums or controlling Helix from the shadows. But others insisted he demanded no personal profit, that he only demanded Helix adopt an ethical path. A philanthropic or moral crusade from a figure previously known for big deals? For many, it felt improbable. Yet that's exactly what the partial leak from Helix staffers indicated: no direct financial demands, only a robust set of reforms. In effect, a moral ultimatum enforced by silent strategic might. City dwellers and the world at large only gradually realized the ramifications. Regions exploited by Helix for cheap labor or minimal environmental regulation started receiving restitution funds. Partnerships with unscrupulous subcontractors were abruptly cancelled. Helix announced a new philanthropic wing, pledging to invest in communities once used purely for resource extraction. Environmentalists who had battled Helix for years found their lawsuits unexpectedly settled. Laws changed. Projects pivoted. If it truly was forced by Trump's evidence, the scale of transformation was unprecedented. Some activists, ironically, expressed grudging respect, having spent decades trying to achieve a fraction of that shift through protests and lawsuits. He just did it in one night, they marveled. A longtime labor rights advocate mused, "We spent half a lifetime fighting Helix in public. Then Trump used a single quiet intervention to transform them from inside out. Maybe that's more effective than 1,000 rallies." But not everyone was thrilled. Some suspect that letting Helix remain largely intact, albeit reformed, was a compromise that short-circuited true accountability. They argued Fallbridge should face legal consequences. But apparently, the deal hammered out that night included letting Fallbridge step away quietly from certain leadership roles with minimal personal repercussions. Did that mean justice got bartered away? Possibly. Yet it's also plausible that prosecuting Fallbridge fully might have embroiled thousands of employees, tangling the entire global supply chain in chaos. Some watchers concluded that, ironically, Trump's approach preserved Helix's beneficial capacities like innovative RD while decapitating or subduing its unethical core. So was it a real victory for justice or an uneasy compromise? The debate raged. Now, the million-dollar question: how did Trump obtain that arsenal of secrets, enough to scare Fallbridge into total compliance? No definitive answer emerged. The most plausible rumor: over years, Trump quietly built networks among small contractors, local activists, and even certain Helix insiders disgruntled by Fallbridge's tyranny. Bit by bit, they fed him documentation. Maybe he financed investigations or paid well for certain leaks, sifting through them until he assembled an unassailable mosaic of Helix's wrongdoing. Some of that wrongdoing, it's said, verged on criminal conspiracies. In short, if Fallbridge didn't concede, the entire Helix brand might face unstoppable legal meltdown. Another angle suggested that, ironically, Fallbridge himself had reached a moral tipping point, deliberately leaving a path for Trump to discover the wrongdoing. But that version feels romantic or improbable, given Fallbridge's well-known cynicism. More likely, Trump found the skeleton key to Helix's darkest closet. As for the quiet act that brought an empire to its knees? The phrase resonated with those who believed the real blow wasn't the evidence itself but the way it was wielded. Instead of turning the confrontation into a public scandal, Trump walked into Helix's lair alone and calmly presented a choice: reform or face total ruin. No press, no dramatic broadcast, no humiliating show for the crowd, just an ultimatum behind closed doors. That forced Fallbridge to make an immediate decision: fight and risk catastrophic exposure, or concede quietly, salvage partial dignity, and preserve Helix in a new, tamed form. He chose the latter. And that was the empire's capitulation, done not with gunfire or lawsuits but with a silent handshake that rewrote corporate history. Which leads me to wonder, do you personally think that kind of secret power brokering is healthy, or would public transparency have been more ethical? Share your thoughts in the comments, because it's a timeless dilemma. Hidden negotiations can yield swift results, but they often bypass public accountability. In the days after the meltdown, staff at Helix's tower reported seeing Fallbridge leave his office for the last time, looking decades older. He gave a half-hearted goodbye to some loyal executives, then vanished from the spotlight. Helix's new leadership, a coalition of less corrupt directors and newly brought-in ethicists, went on a media blitz describing the Helix Renaissance, promising to uphold more socially responsible policies. Their claims were met with cautious optimism and a fair dose of skepticism. Some local activists tested them by demanding swift action in factories overseas, and to many people's surprise, Helix followed through, shutting down exploitative operations. Observers concluded that Fallbridge truly lost the grip that once fueled Helix's darkest expansions. The empire, in effect, had been dethroned from within. And Trump? He left the city quietly, no victory press conference. A single statement from his spokesperson read, "Our interest lies in ensuring that business can be a force for constructive change, not destruction." Many cynics mocked that line, calling it a rebranding attempt. But no additional details emerged. They say he parted from Helix with no further conditions, leaving behind only the reformed structure. That final silence cemented the event's mystique. People recognized something extraordinary. A man famed for large-scale deals, known for high-decibel statements, had, in this instance, delivered the biggest blow in near silence. The community around Helix's global outposts reported slow, steady improvements, better wages, improved safety standards, environmental restitution funds, scholarship programs. Local papers that once labeled Trump a loud opportunist had to revise their narratives. They openly asked, "Is this the same figure, or a new version of him?" Meanwhile, supporters crowed about how cunning he could be behind the scenes, while critics insisted he must have had self-serving motives. Yet if so, what exactly were they? Months later, a curious footnote emerged. An NGO in South America, battling Helix's mining operation, sent a letter of gratitude to an unspecified address. They cited that "your unwavering efforts helped us reclaim our sacred land from corporate exploitation." Many guessed the letter was directed to Trump. Rumor says he politely declined any special credit. Another anecdote told of an old friend from the Middle East praising him for liberating entire families from forced labor contracts. Once again, Trump said nothing publicly. The quiet was, for some, the most confounding element. Normally, big philanthropic or moral victories come with celebrations or at least some form of publicity. Here, there was near total hush. That hush made the phrase "must see," Trump's quiet act that brought an empire to its knees, ring in many folks' minds. Indeed, they believed if people literally saw behind the scenes, they'd understand how colossal that act truly was. And so, the city that once braced for Trump's bombastic show discovered that real power might lie not in tweets or press releases, but in a single unstoppable conversation. In that sense, the meltdown of Helix became a sort of legend, an anecdote told by corporate insiders to new hires, cautioning them about the unpredictable might of quiet leverage. Fallbridge never re-emerged in public life. Some said he retreated to a private estate abroad, quietly nursing regrets. Helix lived on, but rebranded, forging alliances with non-profits, forging new roads that ironically began to earn public trust. Was that the price of redemption or just corporate survival by forced compliance? Likely both. If you're still here, let me remind you how it all started, with a hush of speculation about why Trump was visiting Helix, culminating in an empire's abrupt surrender. That single quiet act, bearing evidence so potent Fallbridge dared not resist, remains a testament to how improbable transformations can unfold behind closed doors. And that is precisely what we refer to when we say "must see," Trump's quiet act that brought an empire to its knees. The phrase might sound like tabloid hyperbole, but from the vantage of those who lived it, it's essentially the truth. Which leads us to the final question: do you think a figure like Trump, armed with that kind of unstoppable leverage, should replicate this approach to other questionable conglomerates or political systems? Or is that a dangerous precedent, one man deciding the fates of entire institutions in private deals? Drop your closing thoughts in the comments, because that question hits at the heart of how society balances moral outcomes against open democratic processes. In the end, one simple gesture changed everything: stepping inside Helix's tower without an entourage, quietly laying out an ultimatum that left Fallbridge no wiggle room. A conversation, not a conquest, but an unstoppable one. The name Trump forever soared or sank in different public opinions, but for those who witnessed or felt the impact, it left them with a humbling notion: sometimes the mightiest empire can be undone not with a war cry, but with quiet, relentless facts placed on the table, turning an unstoppable giant into a chastened, reformed entity. And that might just be the ultimate lesson: rarely does silence carry so much thunder, seldom do we see a single act so quietly orchestrated, so deeply consequential. In a time when so many crow about their power, the real show of force might come from those who speak softly yet hold the final card.